off belong. I cannot believe it's been 3 weeks. So yes, if you haven't come to any of these yet, welcome, hello, it's great to see you. If you have, welcome back. If you would like to catch up on last week or the week before when we looked at identity and suffering and how God can belong with those, you can catch up on the YouTube, which is here where you are now. So you can do that in your own time, and that would be great.
Yeah, and whilst we wait for more people to join, why don't, if you're a student, you comment below which course you're studying, and we can see what range of students we have. From whatever uni, you are so welcome, and if you're not a student, you are so welcome too. Also, just a side note, if you are sharing any of our social media posts, or if you're taking pictures of your setup, don't forget to use the hashtag belong2021, so we can see everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this evening we are going to be looking at belonging when we feel trapped. Like, how can Jesus find us freedom? How can we be truly free in this world? So that is the topic for this evening.
Earlier today, Yola interviewed Naomi, and Naomi, a member of our CU, talked about her experience of feeling trapped and how God has broken through from that.
Let's watch it now.
Hi Naomi, thank you for joining us. To start with, do you want to just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about you?
Yeah, so I'm Naomi and I'm a final year speech and language therapy student studying at Cardiff Met.
Amazing, sounds busy.
Very.
So you are a Christian, you're in the CU. Tell us how that happened. How did you become a Christian?
So I was brought up in a Christian home, so I was kind of around church and all the terminology from quite a young age, but it wasn't until I was a bit older that I kind of finally understood what it all meant and the significance. So I think it was when I was about, although I would have said that I was a Christian, I think it wasn't until I was probably about 14 when I was in Israel and I had the opportunity to be baptized. Wow. And I had to really think about that and what that meant and consider that and really think about what I understood the Bible to be and Jesus to be. So probably around that time. I think I was 14, maybe 15, but not quite sure.
Wow, amazing. And it hasn't been especially easy since, has it? Can you tell us about, we're obviously talking about belonging when we feel trapped this evening. Do you have sort of experience of that? You have an experience of being trapped?
Yes, so I was in a situation for a number of years where I was trapped, is the only way you can really describe it. And I didn't have anyone that I could talk to about it. I was just stuck in this situation, couldn't get out of it. And it was ongoing for quite a while. And it was a really difficult situation. I didn't have anyone I could go to. And at that time I was homeschooled, so I didn't have anywhere that I was going. So I was quite isolated. But then saying that, when I went to college, I was still in this situation. And even though I was going out every day, I was still in this particular situation and was still feeling really isolated and trapped.
Yeah, and obviously that continued. But how did your faith, being a Christian, having Jesus, how did that help you to belong even in those times?
I think it's quite a long answer, really. So to try and condense it a bit, I think it was just difficult. It was really difficult. And I have to say, honestly, there were times where I didn't feel like I belonged, and there were times that my faith was really tested. And I can remember being sat on my bed, crying out to the Lord, wondering if I was even genuinely saved, because I felt so wretched, lost and alone. I couldn't see a way out. I think just clinging on to God's promises, really, and what he says in his word, that he will never leave us or forsake us, and remembering that. And I think it's really important to remember those promises, because it's the times that you forget that, well, I say you, me, spiral and just forget and get ourselves into a tizzy. And it's really difficult when you are trapped, when you are in a situation that you can't necessarily get away from, and you're just having to go through it, and it's not going to end until you go through it. You can't stop it, you can't necessarily escape it, you just have to trust God. And even though I was isolated, just knowing that he was there was quite a comfort, and having his word to read. And so I had a couple of friends in the end that were there for me, and I could go to them and speak to them about the situation, and not necessarily always the situation, but just where I was at, and speak to them, and they pointed me back to the Lord, really. And I was really grateful for them. The Lord really put them in my life when I needed them.
That's amazing. It's been really wonderful to hear a bit about your life and your story, and how God has carried you through with hardships. So thank you for taking your time to talk to us.
Thank you.
It's been brilliant.
Thanks again, Naomi. It was so good to hear your story. And yeah, thank you for sharing.
If Naomi's story that you've heard, or what Matt's about to talk about, leaves you with any questions or just thoughts, absolutely put them in the chat on YouTube Live, or you can head over to Cardiff Met CU on Instagram and message us directly, and we would be happy to respond. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about this.
Yeah, and now we're going to hand over to Matt, who's going to give a talk on belonging when we feel trapped.
Hey, what's up? My name's Matt. It's great to be sharing with you. And I want to start by reading something to you from the Bible. You can find it in the book of Luke, and chapter 10, verses 38 to 43. And it goes like this. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed them into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted with the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." But the Lord said to her, "My dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all the little details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." Sounds pretty cool, right? There is only one thing to be concerned with. I wonder, maybe it's easy to think, oh, times were simpler back then, weren't they, when Jesus was around? Maybe it was a lot easier to just focus on one thing. But today, there are so many things going on, so many distractions, so many things that pull our attention and trap us into what's going on around us. And hey, Jesus didn't have to deal with coronavirus. We're coming to the end of a whole year of coronavirus and social restrictions, which have changed the way that we do life. Maybe you're sitting there right now feeling quite trapped. Maybe you're trapped at home and you want to be at university. Maybe you're at university trapped and you want to be at home. Maybe it's not your geography that's making you feel trapped. We can feel trapped by all sorts of things. But as we come to a stage now where we can see glimpses of lockdown ending, I want to encourage you, and I want to suggest to you that it's probably a really good idea not to get trapped back into the rat race of life. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you know, the rat race, the treadmill, the things that society thinks are successful, the stuff that basically rules so much for our attention and our priorities and what we do with our time and our life. And we can feel so trapped in going through the motions of trying to achieve that it destroys any sense of happiness, any sense of identity, because we're trapped in that rat race of going through the motions. I remember when I was 17 years old, there were like 5 goals, 5 things that were seen as the targets for when you were 25. You should have reached this. You should have been, by the time you're 25, you should be have a job, you should have a car, you should have a house, you should get married, and you should have kids. Car, house, job, married and kids. Now, you know, those things, they're not bad in of themselves, but life is far more than just trying to achieve what society says is the norm, right? Maybe times have changed since I was a teenager. Maybe the list of priorities have changed, and you could come up with your own list. But I'll tell you what hasn't changed is that the pressure is still there. The pressure to conform, the pressure to succeed, the pressure to stand out, the pressure to live your best life, right? All of those things actually, I think, make so many people feel more trapped than ever. The expectations we place on ourselves or others, or our parents put on us, or the fear of missing out or getting it wrong. There's so many things that can eat away at our happiness and rob us of having a good life. What is that one thing that Jesus was on about? What is that one thing that I can attain? That means I don't have to worry about all these other details. Maybe you're watching this. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're tired of chasing after that one thing. You know, there's always that one thing that we're trying to get, and we think, if I get that one thing, I'll be happy. But that one thing is always just over the horizon, isn't it? And sometimes we actually manage to catch up to that one thing, only to find the horizon has moved. And there's another one thing. There's always a little bit more, a little bit something else. If we're always chasing after the one thing, that one more goal, that one more pay rise, just give it one more year, chances are we're never going to catch up to it. But do you know, I once heard a story about a businessman who went to Brazil. And this businessman, he'd been in loads of important meetings. He was feeling quite stressed of having to, meet his targets, whatever he's doing. He went for a walk to clear his head, and he saw along the beach a fisherman. His boat was docked, and he was lying on the beach having a lemonade and just sitting back and soaking it all up and enjoying life. And the businessman thought, well, he looks so happy. I wonder what the secret is. So he goes and he starts talking to the fisherman. And he finds out the fisherman, he gets up in the morning, he goes out on his little boat, he catches enough fish for the day, and then for the rest of the afternoon, he sits on that beach and he enjoys life and watches the world go by. And the businessman starts to think in his businessman's kind of brain, and he starts to think, well, that's all well and good, but maybe if you did something different, you could have a better life. The fisherman's intrigued. He says, well, what is it that you think I should do? And the businessman says, well, maybe if you got up even earlier and you went out in your boat even earlier, you could catch even more fish. Maybe if instead of lying here on this beach, you went out in the afternoon and you went and caught even more fish in the afternoon. The fisherman, curious, says, well, what would I do next? And the businessman, who's starting to get excited by the idea, says, well, once you've caught all these extra fish, you'll be able to sell even more fish in the market. You'll be able to make even more money. And the fisherman says, well, then what would I do? The businessman says, well, once you've got lots more money, you'll be able to buy a bigger boat. And once you've got a bigger boat, you'll be able to go out for longer and further out to sea, and you'll be able to catch even more fish than before. The fisherman, of course, says, what would I do after that? And the businessman says, well, once you've got a bigger boat and you're catching more fish, you'll be able to employ more people, and all of that revenue, you'll be able to buy a second boat. The fisherman says, what would I do then? And the businessman is getting a bit frustrated now because the fisherman doesn't seem to be on board with this idea. He says, look, if you get that bigger boat and then you buy a second boat and each of those boats are going out, eventually you'll be able to buy a fleet of boats and have a whole team of people going out and doing all this fishing for you, catching all this fish. And your life will be so much better. The fisherman says, reflecting on this new business proposal, says, well, then what would I do next? And the businessman, who's irate, says, well, then you'll be able to enjoy your life. You won't have to worry. You'll be able to just sit back and relax and enjoy the sunshine and sip a lemonade. And maybe at some point, I don't know, the businessman realized. But the fisherman certainly did, and he turned to him and said, well, that is exactly what I'm doing right now. Now, it's only a story. There's lots of flaws in it. Don't get too caught up on that story. But the one thing that strikes me about the story is the perspective that the man had, the businessman. He was so caught up in chasing after that one more thing. Actually, there wasn't an end goal of relaxing. There was always more to do, harder work, pressing on, keeping going. But for the fisherman, he'd found peace. He'd found peace in the now. He found freedom from the chase just by doing what he was already doing. I don't know if that speaks to you. It certainly speaks to me. And actually, if we look back at the first story of Mary and Martha that we saw when they met with Jesus, there's a similar thing going on. Martha is so busy with the details. She's so busy with the work. She loves Jesus, but she wants to do lots of things for him. She wants to make the meal. She wants to make the house ready. And she's so busy doing things that she forgets she's got a guest in her house. She forgets to spend time with the person who she loves, the person who cares for her, and ultimately the person who gave her life in the first place, right? Mary, well, she wasn't caught up in the doing. Mary was simply caught up in the being. Like the fisherman, she just sat and she soaked up what was going on. But it wasn't just about, hey, let's just relax. She sat and soaked up Jesus, being in his presence, listening to what he was teaching, learning from the Son of God. Now, both stories, they paint a great picture, and the point isn't to just do nothing. The point of those stories isn't to just, live in the moment. There's something better than chasing after the consuming frivolities of the endless chaos of the rat race. There is something better than that. And I want to suggest to you that the one thing worth chasing after, the one thing that brings freedom from all of that, is knowing Jesus himself. See, what Mary was doing in the story from Luke was that she was sitting and soaking in Jesus. She was gaining everything she needed from him, and she was getting all the life that she needed just by being in his presence. Elsewhere in the book of John, Jesus says this in John 8, verse 35. Jesus says, if the Son, that's himself, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. How amazing is that? If the Son sets you free, if Jesus sets you free from all the things that you can think of, all the trappings, all the busyness of life, all the things that weigh you down, if Jesus sets you free from those things, not yourself, not your efforts, but if Jesus sets you free, you won't just feel a moment of relief. You'll be free indeed. Free from what? You might ask. Free from what? What am I on about? Well, in these stories, in this situation, and what we're talking about to you, freedom from the rat race, freedom from the pressure, freedom from exams, freedom from the feeling that you have to achieve, freedom from being defined by your career or your future career, freedom from feeling trapped by all of the things that society says you have to do and have to be. But, and get this right, there is so much more to what Jesus has to offer than that. I believe that you and I, we were made by God, and we were made to be in relationship with God. But somewhere along the way, we can trace it from Adam and Eve in the story of creation in Genesis in the Bible. But not just them, every human that's ever lived, including you and me, somewhere along the way, we all turned our backs on God. We thought freedom meant doing it our own way. We thought freedom meant rejecting God and trying to do it for ourselves. And while, hey, let's acknowledge there can be temporary pleasure in some of the things this world has to offer, temporary moments of escape from the madness that we see all around us, the chaos that is going on. But if we're honest with ourselves, sooner or later we'll snap back into the reality that whatever temporary moments of escapism and satisfaction we might find, we can't escape the reality that we are broken people. And we are broken people living in a broken world. And guys, there is nothing that we can do ourselves to fix that. In our attempt to be free from God, we have trapped ourselves in what the Bible calls sin. That rebellion from God, that turning our backs on him, that disobeying him, that's what the Bible calls sin. And ultimately, what that has led to, the consequences of our actions, trying to find freedom, ultimately that's led to death. So in trying to find freedom, we've found death and destruction. We've found chaos, and we're trapped in this world. And we can't get out of it in our own strength. But hey, here's the good news. Jesus, he was more than just a good man. He was more than just a moral teacher. Mary wasn't sitting at Jesus' feet so that she could get a great business lesson of what to do next. Because Jesus was so much more than those things. He was also the Son of God. He was God himself in human form. And Jesus, when he came to this earth and lived as a man, he died a death on a cross. You know all about the story of the death and the crucifixion. We hear about it at Easter all the time. But what Jesus did on that moment, even though he was perfect, he took on all of the mess, all the brokenness. He took on your sin and my sin, and he took it himself. And when he died the death that we deserved, so that we wouldn't have to. Jesus died the death that we deserve. 3 days later, he rose again from the dead, proving once and for all that he was who he said he was, the Son of God. And actually, through his death and his resurrection, he made a way to fix the brokenness of this world, to restore the world back to God, and to restore us back into our relationship with God. How amazing is that? Jesus paid the price for our sin in his death, and he made a way for us to find true life with God again. What did Jesus do? Well, Jesus came to free you from sin. Jesus came to free you from death. Jesus came to free you from anything that enslaves you. Whether that is the trappings of this world, the rat race society, whether it's addiction, whether it's not knowing your identity, whether it's loneliness, whatever it is, you no longer have to feel trapped when you know Jesus, because when the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. And I wish that was the end, but it doesn't stop there. Because let me read to you, as I kind of bring this into land, something else that Jesus says, which we can find in the book of Matthew. Jesus is talking to a crowd. And he says this, because, hey, it's all well and good for me to say that Jesus can set you free, but we still live in a broken world, and we still have to deal with the pain and the chaos and the problems of this world. Well, this is what Jesus had to say. It says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you'll drink, or about your body or what you'll wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet their heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? And do not worry about your clothes. See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that even Solomon in all his splendor was not dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow thrown in the fire, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." It's a lovely little message there about not worrying, but that point at the end, seek first his kingdom, seek first God, seek first a relationship with Jesus, and put him in his right place, that he is righteous, he is Lord, he is King. And what happens when we do that? Well, the promise is this, that God will take care of all the other things as well. You're worrying or striving or struggling or running after things. We don't have to, because God knows what you need He loves you and he wants to take care of you. All we need to do is put aside those things and seek him first. That's what Mary did. That's what I've chosen to do. And I want to encourage you, if you've never thought about following Jesus, maybe that's something that you want to do too. Seek him first. He'll take care of the rest. So let me finish by asking you a question. What are you chasing after? What are the things in this world? Just think for a moment. What are the things that inspire you? What are the things that motivate you? What are your priorities right now? What are you giving yourself to, rightly or wrongly? What are you chasing after? And secondly, what makes you feel trapped? Sometimes, quite often, the answer to those two questions is the same thing. I want to encourage you, give it up. Give it to Jesus. All we are asked to do is to ask God for forgiveness, for the wrong things we've done, the wrong way we've treated God. Ask God to forgive us of our sin, and then choose to follow him, to sit at his feet like Mary did, learn from him, be in his presence, and allow God to shape your future and your life. That, I believe, is where we experience true freedom in Christ. That's where we find belonging. That's where we find life and love and the peace of God. If you want that today, well, Jesus is waiting for you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, thank you, Matt, and welcome back, everyone. Just before we go, next week we have a lunch bar at 12:30. If you missed last week's lunch bar, that's still on the YouTube, and that was on Can God and Science Belong Together? So you can catch up on that as well. But this next coming week, the lunch bar is at 12:30, and it's on Can God and Fun Belong Together? Like, is God just a party pooper that doesn't want us to have any fun? Come along 12:30 and find out more about that.
Yeah, and as it will be our last week next week, we have some really exciting things lined up, including a giveaway which you do not want to miss. The topic for next week is belonging when I have no hope. So don't forget to tune in once again, 7:30 on our YouTube channel next Monday. And yeah, the talk is going to be on belonging when I have no hope.
Yes, and again, thanks for coming, everyone. Don't forget to follow us on social media, at Cardiff Met CU on Instagram, Cardiff Met Christian Union on Facebook. And drop us a message if you have any thoughts or questions. We would love to hear from you. If you want a free Bible study book, let us know and we'll send one to you. So that is it from us this evening.
It is.
We hope you have a really lovely night, and we'll see you same place, same time next week. Take care.